For a recap on what happened in the last session, if you wouldn't mind starting and take us away.
Absolutely. So these will be notes from Asger's journal as to what happened. So we started the day on the way to Whitethorn, a city that was close. We were getting to the city pretty close to dusk. We were with our couple of friends that we had made along the way on that adventure. I put notes for the town that it cost 5 silver for a drink, 5 silver for a room, 1 silver for a drink. That's way more. You know, Asger's going to need this for her tour guide later that she makes out of this book. The town of Bone Spring is where we stay because we weren't allowed in to White Thorn. And so we, coming into town, met some very interesting looking adventurers at a tavern table as we got in. After kind of meeting up with them and discussing and sharing pleasantries for a moment, it sounded like a pack of wild dogs was coming closer and closer and closer. These wild dogs that Asger was like, no, it's just puppies, and we don't need to hurt them, because the nice bartender lady said we shouldn't hurt them. She learned we're called demon wolves, but she's never heard the word demons before, so she's really not quite sure what demons are. But Mila and Shirku seemed very, very convinced that these were demons, and thusly Shirku absolutely annihilated quite a few of them, as did Mila, while Asger was just attempting to keep everyone safe and happy and all of that kind of stuff. Mila turned into a giant spider, which was pretty amazing and cool. I'm just trying to be pretty quick through my notes because there's a lot in here, and I don't want to bore you all with everything. Shirku will now be known from Asger as Wolfslayer, and said something about a hateful wraith that came up after they had killed too many of the wolves that we were told not to kill. Which that hateful wraith definitely did a hell of a number on our group for sure. Asger dropped down to 10 max HP, which is not nearly as much HP as I would like my sweet little girl to have. The fight kind of ended as we were thankfully victorious. It was a little touch and go towards the end of the wraith as Shirku got beat up, Mila got beat up, my wonderful friend Diane. No, it won't. Our wonderful friend Dian needs to learn how to protect themselves and stop jumping into the middle of combat, but they made it out mostly okay. And after we did all of this awesome fighting and all that, the people behind the bar gave us a magical item that Asger passed to Dian because of his lack of self-control in combat and needing to be upfront. And then we learned about a gentleman named Enzo who stole a relic, which is why Asger now believes that these shadows came, was that they must be the police force of whatever area this relic was stolen from, because he committed a crime. You're all the ones who wanted me to explain what happened last time, so you're getting the Asger explanation. And
this
that
is more funny.
It really is. It's really great. Where was it? I know that Shirku mentioned something about the flames starting to die out a little bit, and Asger wrote in her notes about needing to make sure she writes a letter to King Galen so that he can get that problem addressed, because no one should be living outside of the light.
Very well done.
And that's about all I got.
Scroll up. Last time, after an intense battle with a few members of the Cult of the Broken Mirrors, Shirku and Mila now find themselves in dwindling numbers. They still have Enzo with them escorting them, but Asger has left to escort Effie and Dian back to town because they want to go on to some illicit adventures. Shirku and Mila have decided that they're going to go scout it out, trying to avoid any major conflicts since they've been having some trouble with the battles already when they were in more numbers. Mila's going to be the one taking over for the intro this time, for the recap of what happened. If you wouldn't mind taking us away.
Yeah. And so currently the party is working together following a quest line searching for an answer to the curse and some answers as to what killed the explorers in Enzo's previous adventures at an abandoned temple civilization sort of thing further in the woods. And Mila and Shirku took on this quest line while the rest of the party went off on pirating adventures. And along the way, as Enzo led Mila and Shirku into the forest, they ran into a couple of travelers being attacked by a pack of horrible mob beasts trying to munch them alive. Once Shirku handily snicker-snacked a number of the beasts along with Mila and the poor besotted adventurers' help, they introduce themselves to each other, and our new players are Zastrava and Cypher. Zastrava is a Yanti bard who is trying to help out Cypher contact the soul of his dead mentor to figure out the way back into the lauded wizard's tower, since his mentor died without explaining where the key was or how to open the door. So there's a whole tower of lost knowledge that's impossible to get into right now. And with that, I hopefully didn't leave too much out.
Absolutely. So, the Asger Journal starts up with Asger waking up at the tavern, realizing that her two friends have decided to leave on a ship adventure without her, as that she seems to have slept in a little bit longer than she meant to, and thus her next best option is to go attempt to find Mila and Shirku, who went off in X direction, which she thankfully kind of knew how to do, and happened to stumble into the rest of the party, which she was very, very happy about. And it turns out that these two, it's those two, have come looking for her because runaway princess. So she was excited that anyone made that long of a boat journey to come find her. And we still had our NPC, whose name I don't remember, and I don't see in my notes anywhere. Renzo. Enzo. I'm writing that down again to make sure I put it in there correctly next time. Enzo had come along with us to make up for stealing from the tomb, which he shouldn't have done, even if it was supposedly archaeology. But Asger doesn't quite understand archaeology. We successfully snuck up to the temple, of which there was some crazy-looking lady up at the top and some kind of weird cultisty people around the sides, which, of course, broke into combat because we needed to smite evil. And in so doing, we learned all of the cool new powers of Asger's friends, which they were exceptionally capable in combat, almost as much as Mila, who did her cool spider into raptor throwing a person off the side of the temple thing, which Asger has in like big, bold, like needs to put this in film kind of like moment in the book. There was a mirror-shaped hole in the temple as we climbed up to the top of it, and the woman up top said the word mirror a few times. Seemed like it was fairly important. Enzo decided to attempt to be sneaky and go around the side, which worked out about as well as any NPC attempting to sneak off around the side by themselves, after Asger told him to stay behind her, as Asger always does. So the safest place is behind the giant leather wall. Mila successfully took out most of the people up on the top, which led to the weird sorcery lady up top deciding she was going to say fuck it and attempt to run deeper into the temple as we were messing with her ritual. Asger attempted to go save Enzo by yelling healing words at him, but not being able to be truly close enough to really see if those healing words were effective. But seeing her companions rushing into the temple, decided to rush in after. We successfully go all the way down this. Mila's being swarmed by ghouls, so Asger attempts to pull the swarm towards her, letting the rest of the party go and attempt to break up this ritual, of which we were so close to doing on many, many, many occasions. But she held out and summoned some kind of crazy undead monstrosities, which may or may not be the consequences we'll need to deal with at some point now. Who knows?
I don't know. Don't know what you're talking about. No consequences.
No consequences at all.
And so our last session, we were reacting after having defeated Lenora and her goons. When we went out of the temple, we unfortunately discovered the body of Enzo and realized that he was in fact gone to us. And we rounded up the 2 remaining goons that Asger had knocked out and proceeded to try to tie them up. While we were doing that, I believe Shirku was going back down to the temple and dragging out Lenora's corpse and then proceeding to chop her up and scatter her to the winds as much as he could, just as a preventative measure. And then we interrogated the first goon to come around, and when Asger wasn't having much success, the Strava stepped in and made it a bit more successful. And after Asger weighed his crimes, decided he was guilty enough to receive capital punishment, and so he did. And then we woke up the other goon and proceeded to talk to her. Then I believe we all started to rest, and on each of our shifts, a couple people tried to talk to her, and one wizard, who will remain unnamed, decided to give her a little bit of an internal crisis. And I believe it was that night or the night that we were...
It was the night after.
Okay, so we started our travel back to the town of somewhere.
Witherthorn.
Witherthorn, perfect. So on our way back to Witherthorn, we had to stop because it was more than a full day of travel. And on that night when we all slept, we each were visited in our dream or had some sort of dream memory going on. The Strava dreamt of her father and a giant black dragon morphing and coming to visit him. John's character had a very disappointing dream where he thought his master was finally going to give him some information. That did not happen. Shirku had a dream about his childhood, or perhaps an unfortunate memory from his past. I believe Mila dreamed of her homeworld, or homeland perhaps, and then Asger dreamed of what kind of set her down this road as an adventure.
Indeed, and so the party gathered their fallen NPC ranger companion and transported him back to town for a funeral close to the residence that he lived in before. After that, they returned to the owner of a bookshop that they had been to before, who is evidently an old and powerful mage who shared some ancient lore with them, gave them a few items before bidding them on their way. And now the party has come to the port to decide which vessel they will embark on for their journey out into the ocean and hopefully to the tropical isle to the southeast of the western continent.
Oh boy, I sure hope we don't run into any krakens on the way.
Krakens, yeah, that's the thing to worry about out in the sea.
Evil DM smile.
What are you talking about? It's perfectly happy DM smile. The DM is perfectly happy thinking about all of the Krakens and other mischievous wonders that he can bring upon you.
You could always do a sea dragon. That'd be fun.
That I
No,
very
it's
well.
actually a siren. Have you ever heard his wonderful singing voice?
Most people have not.
Fun and interesting, absolutely what I would say happened. So we kicked it off by looking at a bunch of different boats, and of course, Asger, being the princess that she is, went, that boat's too small, that boat's not big enough, and that boat is just right, to the giant Roland flagship that was just sitting at the dock very conveniently for all of us. She also thought the bone ship was very interesting, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So, Asger being Asger, just walked up and onto the boat, because Asger doesn't have the best social skills, as that she's a castle-raised, very sheltered child who loves books. And so the crew tried to stop her, but as per always, her amazing Sistrava, I'm going to butcher your name every single time I say it, but probably the scariest amount of intimidation I've ever seen packed into one character is always behind Asger at this point, and just Asger's like, yeah, they really liked me. Like, he continues to do as she will. Walked down to the boat, asked to speak to the captain. The captain figure was like, are you really a princess? The runaway princess? Like, you think I'm gonna believe these lies? And Asger never really lies. She's not very good at the whole lying thing. And so convinced her by the things that she said that she was actually the princess and that they actually needed to go to paradise. The boat is called the Nefarian, which is pretty amazing. An old throwback that I appreciate from Anthony quite a bit. So the captain of the Nefarian is a descendant of Nefarian, who is this big, badass-looking dragonborn, who is questionably now has a deal with Asger that, like, might involve a marriage, might involve tax breaks. Like, she has some, like, circles of notes over here. Like, it's just like, this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. But the first mate on this ship is a Eladrin, who I believe was in his Rowan form when we met him, which is the autumn form.
Kai. He was Kai when you first met him, which is his summer form.
Okay, I wrote that wrong in these notes.
You're good.
I had all the names, I just did not label them correctly at all. Asger went up to them and just went, you have a name called Asger. That's really close. We should be friends. The Eladrin wasn't as so sure about that and challenged all of us to a duel on the boat, which Shirku is the only one who really passed that test very well. I will say that Mila, in her amazing spells, also passed it pretty well and kept him exactly where he needed to be for Shirku to be amazing with the amount of times that a fighter can hit, which is a scary, scary amount of times.
Just a bit. Just a bit.
Just a little bit. So, Asger goes to have dinner with her new dragonborn husbando, and and like gets everyone else in there. We all explain what we're doing, and then Asger has to rip a few pages out of her journal because she's not allowed to talk about the fact that this boat flies. But everyone just found that out as the nighttime. We did a crazy magical spell on the boat, and now we are no longer sailing, but flying to paradise at like maximum speed.
It's not necessarily maximum. You're still going around, the continent, so that way you have less people who see.
Who needs to hide the, biggest secret of the country?
Yeah, why would you ever need to hide that?
Who doesn't want to fear the giant flying boat?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we ended the session with Shirku having a bit of a bad dream where he found out that his mother is still alive and maybe dealing with some consequences of us not being there anymore. Which, that should be interesting to see where that happens. I believe it was something about a dragon of sorts and deals, and possibly sending some henchmen over that way, which, we could have absolutely nothing to do with. Like, that's definitely not our fault. So, we're off to paradise. Asger starts this section of the book off with, in a boat that definitely does not fly by any means. We make our way towards paradise. Shirku woke up and wrote a note for the first time. So Asger's very proud of herself for slowly, rubbing off on Shirku by proximity. Shastrava made a song about all of us, which is also super duper cool. Asger's super looking forward to getting back to home eventually to tell Gwen all about it. Her love interest, the captain, was playing hard to get, and we'll get back to that storyline in a moment. Asger successfully broke into Kai's room to look at all the fancy books, while all of us did work around the not flying boat. It made a pretty good impression. Asger continued to attempt to seduce the captain, which went nowhere, which is to be expected for the low-level charisma paladin, which led to a really wonderful conversation of the captain letting Asger down as sweetly as possible. And then, while that was kind of going on, we also had our recycle wizard making friends with Kai, who also knows his master, which is a whole can of worms, it sounds like, in itself. So we're all curious to see what happens with that. Speaking of the recycle wizard, Asger learned how his book learns new knowledge, and is never stepping foot into a magical bookstore ever again, as that she is now convinced that all magical books eat other books to learn knowledge. This was knowledge she never had before in the castle, and has now come to a very rude awakening on the fact that that is what magical books do, and is now terrified of the recycle wizard and his evil book-eating book. Mila taught a few of us some of the rules of her Paradise Island. We need to obey the gods. The strongest people make the rules. It's all about the rules of survival and not to eat blackberries. She then also taught us some stuff about some monsters, which we quickly didn't listen to when we eventually got to the island after riding there on a small rowboat, and tried to follow the tiny monster we befriended into all of its other friends. But Mila, thankfully, is there to keep us safe. Also, Mila got to sort of introduce us to a bird thing, which was like Asger's whole dream. As soon as she found out there are people who ride giant birds at this place, and they're like the knights of the place. Well, when they got there, they got to meet one right away, which was amazing. And Asger was super curious about their monster language thing. But as we were trekking through the woods, we met this friend, and I will let Rin take over the scary map monster thing we have. So we absolutely kind of kicked it off with a bang, as it were. And by a bang, I mean one really, really, really big dinosaur. It happened to have the old leader of the changelings insignia over its eye, but it had a claw mark through it, so we were hoping maybe it was blind on one side, but we decided to start running for our lives before actually fighting it. So the world may never know. We got introduced to Phil, who is questionably a ghost / creepy weird man thing. Phil did a wonderful job of going up to the giant dinosaur and slapping it across the face, which for some reason actually worked, and we were all very impressed. It bought us enough time to use tactic number 13 in Asger's tactic manual, which is run for your life because you fucked around and found out. Shirku decided that Shirku was going to try to battle the thing for a moment, so Shirku sent out other Shirku, who also got immediately eviscerated by the dinosaur. and then also joined the running along with the rest of us plan. As we were all running for our lives, we got to meet another interesting, not quite as ghostly friend called Gibson. Just this large, fat man, oozing pus and things. He was an interesting fellow who bought us just a few more seconds as we were running for our lives. Mila, being Mila, was able to make friends with some raptors and be like, come along now, we're all running, so we just need to go. Until we eventually got to the part that we had a Jurassic Park 3 showdown between a also giant dinosaur and the one that we brought in while we hid inside of a tree. And then we're able to thankfully sneak away without being noticed. Mila, being our tour guide of Dino Island, was able to find us a safe space to kind of nest down for the night. It gave us very useful information about paying attention to the herbivores. And so Asger had a dream about the evil book, and then we got a dodo for breakfast / lunch stuff, which was fantastic. The next morning, we woke up to the current leader of the changelings on an even bigger dinosaur than the couple that we had run away with from the other day. Came and was like, what are you doing in my forest, more or less. Mila and him had a wonderful conversation about how she was the most successful changeling in bringing back all of the information the goddess asked for, and his response mostly seemed like, that's a cool story, please get out of my forest. Which, you know, that was cool. He asked a lot of questions about dragons, but like, you already have dinosaurs, so what do you need dragons for? Was Asger's whole take on that. Like, you have way cooler monsters already. Like, plus yours has feathers. Dragons don't have feathers. Dragons aren't as cool. But he did get us a cool dinosaur to ride up towards where the goddess was usually hanging out. We had a wonderful conversation with her, in which case Asger acted like Asger and got called out for being nobility, as she has many a time at this point. Mila was basically just, oh my god, what have I done, by just like forgetting to tell them how to actually talk to the goddess correctly, because we definitely may have gotten on her last nerves very quickly. But Mila was able to kind of keep everything calm and everything okay. We explained the whole situation, and the goddess was nice enough to boop us out of her entire island and back to the place we had just come from, so that we can go deal with the mess that we sort of created, maybe. But we're definitely not taking responsibility for it.